Tanya Williams woke up early that Tuesday morning, the sunlight just peeking through the blinds of her small apartment. She had a routine she followed every day, but today she felt a quiet excitement mixed with the usual nervousness. Working as a waitress in a small cafe downtown was not an easy job. The hours were long, the tips sometimes small, and the customers could be unpredictable. Yet Tanya loved it. She liked meeting people, helping them, and making their mornings a little better with a smile and a warm cup of coffee. After getting ready, she put on her uniform, a simple black apron over a plain white shirt. She tied her hair back neatly and looked in the mirror. Just another day, she said to herself, trying to shake off the lingering fatigue of the early hour. She grabbed her bag, locked her apartment door, and walked to the bus stop. The streets were quiet, but she could already feel the city waking up. People were rushing, buses were clanging, and somewhere nearby, someone was playing music from a car stereo. It was the kind of morning that could either make you feel alive or make you wish you were still in bed. When Tanya arrived at the cafe, she noticed it was busier than usual. A few regular customers were already seated at their usual tables, quietly drinking coffee or reading newspapers. She waved at them as she walked in, smiling. The cafe was small but cozy. The walls were painted a warm yellow, and the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods filled the air. The tables were arranged neatly, each with a small vase holding a single flower. It wasn't a fancy place, but it felt welcoming, and Tanya loved the atmosphere. Her manager, Mr. Hawkins, was behind the counter, looking stern as usual. He was a tall man with graying hair and a permanent frown etched on his face. Tanya had always known that pleasing him was nearly impossible. He was strict about rules, punctuality, and following procedures. There was little room for kindness or flexibility in his eyes, and Tanya had learned long ago to be careful around him. She gave him a polite good morning, and he nodded without looking up from the cash register. Tanya sighed quietly and started her shift, moving from table to table, taking orders, and refilling coffee cups. Around mid-morning, the door opened, and a customer walked in. Tanya noticed him immediately. He was an older man, probably in his late 70s, moving slowly with a cane. His uniform of a faded jacket and neat trousers suggested he had been careful about his appearance, even at his age. Tanya had a feeling he might be a veteran. His eyes were kind but tired, and there was a faint hesitation in his step, as if he wasn't sure he could handle the small flight of steps leading to the cafe. Tanya's instincts kicked in. She approached him gently, her voice calm and friendly. "Good morning, sir. Would you like some help finding a seat?" The man looked up, a faint smile forming on his lips. "Oh, thank you, young lady. That would be very kind," he said, his voice soft but polite. Tanya guided him to a table near the window where he could sit comfortably. She pulled out his chair for him and made sure he was seated safely. Once he was seated, Tanya handed him a menu and a glass of water. She noticed he had difficulty holding the menu because of his hands. She smiled reassuringly. "Take your time, sir. I can help you with anything you need," she said. The man looked at her gratefully, his eyes showing relief. "You have a kind heart," he said. Tanya smiled, brushing off the compliment. "I just like to help when I can," she replied. She went back behind the counter, keeping an eye on him. She noticed he was struggling slightly with the menu and the small table. Tanya quickly prepared a few things that she thought he might like, a warm cup of coffee, a slice of freshly baked bread, and some butter. She brought them over personally, placing them gently in front of him. "I thought this might make things easier for you," she said kindly. The man nodded, touched by her gesture. "You are very thoughtful," he said again. Meanwhile, Mr. Hawkins was watching from behind the counter. His frown had deepened as he observed Tanya's actions. He muttered under his breath, "Always bending the rules, thinking she's better than everyone else." Tanya didn't notice him at first. She was focused on making sure the veteran was comfortable and had everything he needed. She poured a little more coffee into his cup and asked if he needed anything else. The veteran, whose name was Mr. Lewis, began telling her about his morning. He had walked from his home a few blocks away, trying to get some fresh air before the city got too busy. He mentioned that walking was difficult for him these days and that he appreciated small gestures of help. Tanya listened carefully, nodding and asking questions. She wanted him to feel valued, respected, and comfortable. Other customers started noticing the interaction. Some smiled at Tanya, admiring her kindness. A few whispered to each other about how rare it was to see someone genuinely helping another person without expecting anything in return. Tanya, however, remained focused on her task, unaware of the small ripple she was creating in the cafe that morning. As the minutes passed, Mr. Lewis seemed to relax. He was sipping his coffee, enjoying the warmth and the quiet conversation. Tanya checked on him frequently, making sure he had everything he needed. She even offered to help him with his payment, but he insisted he could manage. "I appreciate your help, young lady, but I can handle this myself," he said, smiling. Tanya nodded, respecting his independence. However, not everyone was pleased with her actions. Mr. Hawkins' grumbling grew louder. He believed that no special treatment should be given to anyone, no matter the circumstances. He felt Tanya was overstepping her role and potentially causing problems with cafe rules and policies. He made a mental note to confront her later, though he did not realize how serious the situation would become. Tanya continued her work, checking on other tables and ensuring all customers were served. Her kindness to Mr. Lewis did not go unnoticed by the other staff members. Some whispered to each other, praising her patience and compassion. Tanya remained humble, simply feeling good about helping someone who had served his country. Around 11 a.m., the cafe started to fill up with more customers. The lunch crowd was beginning to arrive, bringing more orders and noise. Tanya juggled taking orders, refilling drinks, and helping Mr. Lewis when he needed assistance. Her movements were fluid, practiced, and efficient. She never showed any sign of stress, even though the situation with Mr. Hawkins loomed in the back of her mind. Mr. Lewis finished his coffee and began to eat his bread. He looked at Tanya and said softly, "You have reminded me that there are still good people in the world. Thank you for your kindness." Tanya smiled warmly, touched by his words. "It's nothing, sir. I just want to help," she said. But Mr. Hawkins had finally had enough. He walked briskly toward Tanya, his face red with frustration. Tanya noticed him approaching and felt a slight nervousness. She tried to keep her focus on her work, hoping it wouldn't turn into a confrontation. But she knew, deep down, that it probably would. As he reached her, he spoke sharply. "Tanya, we need to talk in the office," he said. Tanya felt her stomach drop. She nodded quietly and followed him, trying to maintain her composure. She didn't know it yet, but her morning of kindness was about to collide with Mr. Hawkins' strict rules in a way she could never have expected. Mr. Lewis watched her go, sensing that something was wrong. He shook his head slightly, feeling uneasy. Tanya's small act of helping him had brought warmth to his day, but he could sense that the kindness was about to be challenged. Outside the office, Tanya took a deep breath. She tried to prepare herself for whatever was coming. She knew she had done nothing wrong, yet she also knew Mr. Hawkins rarely saw things the way others did. Her heart pounded as she opened the door, stepping into a situation that would test her patience, courage, and sense of justice. And so, the quiet morning at the small cafe, filled with the aroma of coffee and the soft chatter of customers, was about to turn into something that would change Tanya's life forever. A simple act of helping a disabled veteran had set the stage for a moment of conflict, one that would soon escalate beyond anything she could have imagined. Tanya followed Mr. Hawkins into the small office behind the cafe. The office was cramped, with a cluttered desk, stacks of papers, and a faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. The sunlight coming through the blinds created lines of light on the worn carpet, but the brightness did nothing to lighten the tension in the room. Tanya's heart raced as she tried to steady her breathing. She had always known that Mr. Hawkins could be strict, but she had never expected her simple act of kindness toward a disabled veteran to lead to this moment. Mr. Hawkins sat down behind his desk and motioned for Tanya to take the chair in front of him. Tanya hesitated for a moment, then sat carefully, keeping her hands folded on her lap. She looked at him calmly, hoping that the conversation could be reasonable. Mr. Hawkins, however, had a frown that showed no hint of softness. "Tanya," he began, his voice low but firm, "I need to talk to you about what just happened out there." Tanya nodded, trying to remain composed. "I saw you helping that man. You took extra time, gave him free service, and ignored the rules we have here. That is not acceptable." Tanya's eyes widened slightly. "Sir, he's a disabled veteran," she said softly. "I was just trying to help him. He served the country, and he needed a little assistance." "I didn't think you didn't think." Mr. Hawkins interrupted sharply. "That's the problem. Rules exist for a reason. We cannot allow employees to decide who gets special treatment. If I let this happen once, it sets a precedent. Other employees might do the same. And what about customers who expect us to follow policy? This is not about kindness, this is about order." Tanya felt a lump in her throat. She had expected some criticism, but not this extreme reaction. She tried again, her voice steady despite the nervousness she felt. "I understand, sir. But he is a veteran. He served in the military. He has given his life to protect this country. I thought helping him was the right thing to do." Mr. Hawkins shook his head, his expression hardening. "It doesn't matter who he is. You broke the rules. And because of that, Tanya, you're fired. Effective immediately." The words hit Tanya like a heavy weight. She could barely believe what she was hearing. Fired? Just like that? For helping someone in need? She felt a rush of shock, anger, and sadness all at once. Her eyes widened, and her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "Please, sir," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly, "I was only trying to help. He couldn't manage on his own. Isn't that what being kind is about?" Mr. Hawkins leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Kindness has nothing to do with it. Rules are rules. You chose to ignore them, and now you must face the consequences. Pack your things and leave. You will not work here anymore." Tanya's mind raced. She had spent months at this cafe, working hard, serving customers with a smile, and always doing her best. She had never had a complaint, never broken any serious rules, and yet this one act of compassion had led to her dismissal. She felt a sense of injustice that burned in her chest. She stood slowly, her legs feeling weak. "May I at least finish serving my current customers?" she asked quietly. Mr. Hawkins shook his head. "No. Your shift is over. Leave now." Tanya nodded silently and left the office, her hands shaking slightly. She walked back to the main area of the cafe, feeling the weight of every eye on her. Some customers looked surprised, others confused. A few staff members avoided her gaze, unsure of what to do. Tanya kept her head high, refusing to cry in front of everyone, though her heart ached. She walked past Mr. Lewis, the veteran she had helped. He looked up at her, concern in his eyes. "Are you all right, young lady?" he asked softly. Tanya managed a small smile. "I'll be fine, sir. Don't worry about me." But inside, she felt devastated. She had only tried to do good, and now she had lost her job. Gathering her belongings, Tanya moved toward the door. She felt a mix of emotions: anger at the unfair treatment, sadness at the situation, and worry about what would come next. The city outside seemed bright and alive, but Tanya felt trapped in a cloud of disappointment. She opened the door and stepped outside, taking a deep breath of fresh air. The morning sun was warm on her face, but it did little to calm her nerves. She thought about the effort she had put into her job, the people she had helped, and the loyalty she had shown to the cafe. It seemed unfair that a small act of kindness could lead to such harsh punishment. Mr. Lewis, who had finished his coffee, watched her from his table. He could see the hurt in her eyes and felt a surge of concern. He had never imagined that someone could be fired for helping him. He reached for his phone and dialed a number, quietly explaining the situation to a friend. He mentioned the young woman who had gone out of her way to help a veteran and how she had been treated unfairly. Meanwhile, Tanya walked slowly down the street, her apron still tied around her waist. She tried to calm herself, repeating silently that things would get better, that she would find another job, that she would not let this moment define her. Yet she could not shake the feeling of injustice that weighed heavily on her. Back at the cafe, Mr. Hawkins returned to the counter, muttering under his breath. Some of the staff exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to respond. The customers murmured quietly among themselves, a few of them expressing sympathy for Tanya. But for now, the cafe returned to its normal rhythm, the sound of coffee machines and chatter filling the air once more. Outside, Tanya sat on a nearby bench, trying to gather her thoughts. She felt the sting of unfairness, but also a determination rising within her. She had done nothing wrong. She had helped someone in need, and she knew in her heart that her actions were right. She would not let this moment crush her spirit. As she sat there, a few customers who had witnessed the incident approached her quietly. They expressed their support, telling her that what she had done was admirable and that they were sorry she had been treated so poorly. Tanya listened, grateful for their words, but also feeling a sense of helplessness. She had lost her job, and she did not know what would happen next. Unknown to Tanya, Mr. Lewis was not done yet. He continued to make calls to his friends, many of whom were active duty or retired Marines. He described the situation, explaining how Tanya had been fired for helping a disabled veteran. The story sparked outrage among his friends, who were determined to see justice done. They promised to check on her and make sure she was treated fairly. Tanya remained unaware of the storm brewing on her behalf. She focused on taking deep breaths, trying to calm the mix of anger, sadness, and frustration swirling inside her. She thought about the lessons she had learned, about the importance of kindness, and about how one small act could sometimes lead to unexpected consequences. As the minutes passed, more people began to notice Tanya sitting quietly on the bench. Some offered words of encouragement, while others simply nodded in recognition of her difficult situation. Tanya felt a mixture of gratitude and hope. She realized that even in the face of injustice, there were people who appreciated and understood her actions. By late morning, Tanya decided to stand up and continue walking. She knew she needed to process what had happened and think about her next steps. She walked slowly, reflecting on the events of the morning, her thoughts shifting between anger at the unfair treatment and pride in her decision to help a veteran. Little did she know, the story of her firing was already spreading. Mr. Lewis' friends, determined to support her, were mobilizing. The quiet cafe morning that had started with a simple act of kindness was about to turn into a situation far larger than Tanya could have imagined. As Tanya walked down the street, her apron now folded in her bag, she felt a strange mix of vulnerability and courage. She had been wronged, yes, but she had acted with integrity. And somewhere, not far away, a group of people who understood the value of her actions were preparing to make sure that justice was served. The events of that morning would soon prove that acts of kindness, even when punished, could inspire loyalty, courage, and action from unexpected places. Tanya did not yet know it, but her decision to help a disabled veteran was about to change her life in ways she could never have imagined. As Tanya walked slowly down the street, her mind was a storm of thoughts. She tried to calm herself, thinking that losing her job was the worst that could happen. But deep inside, she felt a mix of fear and frustration. She had acted out of kindness, and now she was facing consequences that felt cruel and unfair. She walked past the busy shops and cafes, the sound of car engines and chatter all around her. People passed by without noticing the quiet struggle she carried in her heart. Meanwhile, Mr. Lewis, the veteran Tanya had helped, was far from idle. He had picked up his phone again and was talking to a former Marine named Sergeant Ramirez. "You won't believe what just happened," Mr. Lewis said, his voice a mixture of shock and anger. "This young woman, Tanya, she helped me, she gave me coffee, served me when I could barely stand, and made sure I was comfortable. And the cafe fired her. Fired her. Can you imagine?" Sergeant Ramirez listened carefully, his brow furrowing. "They fired her? For helping a veteran? That's not right," he said firmly. "She didn't do anything wrong. We need to do something about this." "I agree," Mr. Lewis said. "I want to make sure she's safe and that she knows people appreciate her. She didn't deserve this." He explained the whole situation, from the moment Tanya had helped him to the moment Mr. Hawkins had fired her. He described her courage, her kindness, and how she had stayed calm even under pressure. "Leave it to me," Sergeant Ramirez said. "I'll call a few of our friends, see if we can get some support. She deserves to be recognized, not punished." He quickly made a series of calls, contacting retired and active Marines who were nearby. As he spoke, a plan began to form. They would make sure Tanya's story was heard. They would show support, not only for her but also for the idea that helping others was the right thing to do. Back on the street, Tanya continued walking, unaware of the storm building on her behalf. She passed a park where children were playing, their laughter echoing across the open space. She stopped for a moment, watching them, and felt a pang of sadness. She thought about how unfair the world could be, how someone who only wanted to do good could be treated so harshly. But she also felt a spark of hope. Deep down, she knew that what she had done was right. At the same time, word of Tanya's firing began to spread quickly. One of the cafe's regular customers, who had witnessed the event, posted about it on social media. The post described how a young woman had been fired simply for helping a disabled veteran, praising her actions and questioning the cafe's decision. Within minutes, the post was shared dozens of times, and comments of support began pouring in. People were outraged that someone could face punishment for showing compassion. By late morning, a small crowd of people had gathered near the cafe, curious about the story they had read online. Some were former military members who felt a strong connection to Tanya's actions. Others were simply everyday citizens who believed in kindness and fairness. All of them were united by the desire to see justice done. Meanwhile, Sergeant Ramirez and his team of Marines were preparing to take action. They were organized and disciplined, ready to respond quickly and respectfully. They had no intention of causing chaos or confrontation. Their goal was to support Tanya and ensure that the injustice she faced was addressed. They loaded their vehicles and set out toward the cafe, their minds focused on the mission at hand. As they drove through the city streets, they discussed the best way to approach the situation. "We need to be careful," Sergeant Ramirez said. "We want to support her, not create a scene that could make things worse. Tanya deserves respect, and we will make sure she gets it." The team nodded in agreement. They were all veterans, accustomed to working together and handling difficult situations with patience and professionalism. They understood the importance of showing solidarity while maintaining control and dignity. Back at the cafe, the atmosphere had shifted. Customers were whispering among themselves, and staff members were nervously glancing at the entrance, unsure of what was happening. The social media posts had reached some of them, and they were starting to feel the pressure of public attention. Mr. Hawkins, unaware of the approaching Marines, continued with his work, though a faint unease began to settle in. Tanya, still unaware of what was coming, had decided to find a quiet place to sit and think. She walked toward a nearby park, hoping to gather her thoughts and consider her next steps. She felt exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The events of the morning had been overwhelming, and she longed for a moment of calm. As she sat on a bench under a large oak tree, she noticed a few people approaching, their faces serious but kind. One of them, an older man in a marine jacket, stopped in front of her. "Tanya?" he asked gently. She looked up, surprised. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "My name is Sergeant Ramirez," the man said, extending his hand. "We heard what happened at the cafe. You didn't deserve that treatment. We're here to support you." Tanya blinked in disbelief. She had expected strangers to ignore her, but instead, she was faced with a group of people who understood her actions and wanted to stand by her. Before she could respond, more Marines arrived, stepping out of their vehicles in a respectful but organized manner. They formed a small group around her, their presence calm yet powerful. Tanya felt a mixture of awe and relief. She had never experienced anything like this before. She realized that she was not alone, that people who shared her values were willing to stand with her. "Thank you," Tanya said softly, her voice filled with emotion. I don't know what to say. I never expected anyone to help me." Sergeant Ramirez smiled. "You don't need to say anything. You did the right thing. That's enough. We're here to make sure you know that your kindness matters." As they spoke, a small crowd of curious onlookers gathered nearby. Some had seen the social media posts, while others were simply drawn by the presence of the Marines. The atmosphere was tense but hopeful, filled with the promise of support and justice. One of the Marines handed Tanya a bottle of water. "Take a moment," he said kindly. "You've had a difficult morning. We want to make sure you're okay before anything else happens." Tanya nodded, taking a deep breath and feeling the warmth of their care. In the distance, the cafe remained unaware of the approaching storm. Mr. Hawkins continued his work, oblivious to the growing attention. But it would not be long before he realized that the situation had escalated far beyond his control. Tanya, sitting quietly among the Marines, felt a sense of calm return. She had been fired, yes, but she was not defeated. She was surrounded by people who respected her actions, who understood the value of helping others, and who were willing to take action to support her. As the morning turned to afternoon, Sergeant Ramirez spoke to Tanya again. "We're going to visit the cafe," he said gently. "Not to cause trouble, but to make sure your story is heard. You've done nothing wrong, and people need to know that. Are you ready?" Tanya nodded, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nerves. She had never imagined that helping someone in need could lead to such an incredible display of support. She realized that her actions had inspired others, that kindness could create a ripple effect far beyond her control. The Marines organized themselves, and Tanya followed their lead. As they approached the cafe, the crowd that had gathered earlier watched with anticipation. The tension in the air was palpable, but so was the sense of justice that hung over the scene. Inside the cafe, Mr. Hawkins finally noticed the group approaching. His eyes widened as he saw the Marines standing near the entrance, their posture calm but firm. He had no idea what was coming, and the sense of unease that had been growing all morning suddenly became very real. The group entered the cafe quietly, led by Sergeant Ramirez. Tanya walked beside him, feeling a mix of fear and hope. She had no idea how the situation would unfold, but she knew that she was not alone. She had people who believed in her, people who were willing to stand by her and ensure that fairness and respect were upheld. As the door closed behind them, the cafe fell silent. Customers and staff alike turned to see what was happening. Tanya took a deep breath, her heart pounding, and prepared to face the moment that would change everything. As Tanya and the Marines stepped inside the cafe, the sudden quiet felt almost deafening. Every pair of eyes turned toward them. Customers froze in mid-bite, some drinks still in hand, while the staff glanced nervously at each other, unsure of what was about to happen. The air was thick with tension, and Tanya could feel her heart racing. She had never been in a situation like this before. One moment, she had been fired unfairly, and the next, she was surrounded by a team of disciplined Marines ready to back her up. Sergeant Ramirez walked confidently to the counter, his presence commanding respect without a single word spoken. He glanced at Mr. Hawkins, who was standing behind the register, frozen like a deer in headlights. "Mr. Hawkins," Ramirez said calmly but firmly. "We need to have a conversation about what happened here this morning." Mr. Hawkins swallowed hard. His face was pale, and his hands trembled slightly. I don't understand," he stammered. I thought she was breaking your rules." Sergeant Ramirez interrupted gently. "No, she wasn't breaking any rules. She was helping a disabled veteran. That is not just acceptable, that is honorable. And firing her for that is wrong, plain and simple." Tanya stood quietly beside the Marines, her hands clasped together. She was nervous, but seeing the support around her gave her courage. The customers and a few staff members began to murmur among themselves. Some nodded in agreement, clearly shocked that someone could be punished for an act of kindness. One of the younger Marines, a man named Corporal Jenkins, stepped forward. "We've seen this happen before," he said firmly. "People who try to do good sometimes face unfair treatment. But today, that ends. Tanya helped a veteran, and that should be recognized, not punished. You need to make this right." Mr. Hawkins swallowed again and looked around the room. For the first time, he seemed aware of the weight of the situation. The whispers from the customers were growing louder. Some people had already pulled out their phones, recording the scene. Social media was ready to explode, and the cafe owner could feel that his reputation was on the line. Tanya took a deep breath. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said softly but clearly. "I just wanted to help someone who needed it. I never imagined I would be fired for being kind. I don't want anyone else to be treated like this, either. I just want fairness." Her words hung in the air. They were simple, honest, and filled with sincerity. Even some of the staff members who had been hesitant now looked at her with newfound respect. One of the cooks, a middle-aged woman, stepped forward. I saw what happened," she said quietly. "She was just helping him. I don't think she should have been fired." Sergeant Ramirez nodded. "Exactly. People who help others should be praised, not punished. Tanya's actions reflect the best of humanity. It's time for the cafe to recognize that and do the right thing." Mr. Hawkins looked around the room again, and for the first time, he seemed unsure of what to do. His mind raced as he thought about the social media attention, the crowd of people in his cafe, and the Marines standing before him. He realized that trying to defend his decision to fire Tanya would only make things worse. Finally, he took a deep breath and spoke. "You're right," he said, his voice low but steady. "I was wrong. I fired her unfairly, and I want to apologize. Tanya, I'm sorry for the way I treated you. It was a mistake, and I understand now that you were only trying to help." Tanya blinked, surprised. She had expected resistance, maybe anger, but not an apology. She felt a mix of relief and disbelief. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means a lot. I just hope that in the future, people are encouraged to do good without fear of punishment." The Marines nodded approvingly, satisfied that their presence had helped bring about a positive change. Sergeant Ramirez stepped closer to Tanya. "You handled this with courage," he said quietly. "You didn't back down, and you didn't let fear stop you. That's something to be proud of." The customers in the cafe began clapping softly at first, then louder as the atmosphere shifted from tension to celebration. People were moved by Tanya's story, and they admired her bravery and kindness. Some of them even approached her to offer words of encouragement, telling her that her actions had inspired them. Outside, more Marines had arrived, maintaining a respectful distance but ready to step in if needed. They had anticipated that the situation might escalate, but it had already begun to resolve peacefully. Tanya could feel the support from everyone around her, and for the first time that morning, she allowed herself to breathe freely. Sergeant Ramirez then turned to Mr. Hawkins. "You have an opportunity here," he said. "You can make amends. You can show the community that your business values kindness and respects those who serve. Actions speak louder than words." Mr. Hawkins nodded slowly, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He realized that this was more than just a single incident, it was a chance to rebuild trust and demonstrate integrity. "You're right," he said. "I want to make this right. Tanya, I'd like to offer you your job back. I understand if you don't want it, but I want to correct my mistake." Tanya looked at him, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to accept the offer and continue working at the cafe she had grown to love. But another part of her wondered if this was the right time to move forward in a new direction. She glanced at Sergeant Ramirez, who gave her a reassuring nod. "I appreciate that," Tanya said finally. "But I think I need some time to think. What matters to me most is that people understand that helping others is the right thing to do." Sergeant Ramirez smiled. "That's fair. What you've done is bigger than one cafe. Your actions have already made a difference." As the day continued, Mr. Hawkins took steps to make amends. He spoke to his staff, encouraging them to treat customers with kindness and respect. He also reached out to the community, sharing an apology and highlighting Tanya's courage. Slowly, the cafe's atmosphere shifted from tension to warmth. People who had been skeptical or indifferent were now inspired by the story of a young woman who stood up for what was right. Tanya left the cafe later that afternoon, accompanied by the Marines. As they walked down the street, she felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. The support she had received was overwhelming, and she realized that doing good, even in the face of fear, was always worth it. "You did something amazing today," Sergeant Ramirez said as they reached the corner. "You reminded people that kindness and courage matter. That's a lesson we all need to hear." Tanya smiled, feeling proud but humble. "I just wanted to help," she said. "I never imagined it would turn into something like this." "That's the beauty of it," Ramirez replied. "Small acts of kindness can create big changes. You've made a difference today, Tanya. Don't ever forget that." As the Marines departed to return to their own lives, Tanya felt a sense of peace. She knew that the morning's events would be remembered, not for the firing or the tension, but for the courage, compassion, and unity that had brought people together. She had faced fear, stood up for what was right, and inspired others in the process. In the days that followed, the story of Tanya's actions spread throughout the city and beyond. Local news outlets covered the incident, praising her bravery and the support of the Marines. Social media posts went viral, sharing the lesson that helping others should always be encouraged and celebrated. Tanya received messages from people she had never met, thanking her for showing what true kindness looked like. Even the cafe began to recover from the incident. Mr. Hawkins made efforts to rebuild trust with his customers and staff, acknowledging the mistake he had made. He implemented new policies that encouraged compassion and understanding, ensuring that no one would face unfair treatment again. Through it all, Tanya remained humble. She never sought attention or recognition, her actions had come from a place of genuine care. But she understood the impact of what had happened. She realized that even small gestures could ripple outward, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. And so, Tanya's story became more than just a tale of a young woman fired unfairly. It became a story of courage, kindness, and the power of standing up for what is right. It was a reminder that even in difficult situations, one person's actions can inspire change, bring people together, and make the world a better place one small act at a time. After the events at the cafe, life slowly began to settle down for Tanya, but things were very different now. The story of her courage and kindness had spread quickly through the town, and even beyond, reaching people she had never met. She received calls, messages, and letters from strangers who wanted to thank her for standing up for what was right. Many said her story had inspired them to help others, even in small ways, and that was something Tanya had never imagined would happen. She felt proud but also humbled, knowing that what she had done was simply the right thing. Tanya decided to take some time for herself before returning to work. She spent her mornings walking through the park, thinking about everything that had happened. She remembered the disabled veteran she had helped, the moment the Marines had entered the cafe, and the apology from Mr. Hawkins. Each memory was a reminder that courage and kindness could make a real difference in the world. She began to understand that standing up for what was right might feel scary, but it could also lead to positive changes that were far bigger than she had imagined. Meanwhile, the cafe slowly began to recover. Mr. Hawkins had realized that he needed to change the way he ran his business. He began attending community meetings, listening to feedback, and learning from his mistakes. He made new rules to ensure that all customers and staff were treated with respect and fairness. The employees, inspired by Tanya's actions, started being kinder to each other and to the customers. The cafe became a place where people felt welcome, where kindness was expected, and where helping others was celebrated. Even some of the regular customers who had previously complained about minor issues began to notice the positive change in the atmosphere. They appreciated the effort Mr. Hawkins was making to correct his mistakes and began supporting the cafe again. Tanya received a message from one of the Marines who had been at the cafe that day. It read, "Tanya, your courage that day inspired all of us. Remember that even small actions matter. Never stop helping people when you see them in need. You have the heart of a leader." Tanya smiled as she read it. She realized that sometimes, courage was not about fighting battles with fists, but standing up for what was right, even when it was scary. She felt grateful for the support of the Marines and for the way they had helped her that day. Without them, the situation could have been much harder. Over the next few weeks, Tanya's story caught the attention of local newspapers and online news websites. Reporters interviewed her about what had happened, focusing on her bravery and her decision to help a disabled veteran despite the risk to her own job. Tanya spoke honestly and simply, explaining that she had just wanted to do the right thing. She did not want fame or attention, she just wanted people to understand that helping others was important and should never be punished. The article went viral, and many people shared her story, praising her for her courage. Some shared their own experiences of helping others, inspired by her example. Despite all the attention, Tanya remained humble. She focused on the things that mattered most to her: her family, her friends, and her own personal growth. She started volunteering at a local veterans center, helping people who had served in the military and were struggling with daily life. She spent time talking with them, learning their stories, and offering assistance whenever she could. Tanya felt a deep sense of fulfillment from this work. It reminded her of the veteran she had helped at the cafe and showed her that one small act of kindness could lead to a lifetime of service. Tanya also began taking a class in community leadership at a local center. She wanted to learn how to make a bigger impact in her town and in the lives of people who needed help. The class taught her about organizing events, speaking to groups, and creating projects that could help others. Tanya realized that her experience at the cafe had given her a unique perspective on leadership. It showed her that being a leader was not about power or authority, but about standing up for what was right, helping others, and inspiring people through actions. One day, she received a call from Mr. Hawkins. He wanted to speak with her personally, not about the cafe or her job, but just to thank her again. "Tanya," he said, "I want you to know that your actions changed me. I see things differently now. I've learned the importance of kindness, respect, and fairness. I'm truly sorry for how I treated you, and I want to thank you again for showing me the right way to run a business." Tanya smiled and replied, "Thank you for saying that. What matters most is that things are changing for the better. People deserve to be treated with respect, and I'm glad you're helping make that happen." Her life continued to evolve in ways she had never expected. She began speaking at local schools, sharing her story with students about the importance of helping others and standing up for what is right. She told them that it was okay to feel nervous or scared, but that courage was acting despite fear. The students listened intently, inspired by her honesty and bravery. Some even came up to her afterward to share their own stories of helping friends or family members, showing Tanya that her actions had created a ripple effect of kindness throughout the community. Tanya also stayed in touch with the Marines who had come to her aid. They would occasionally meet for coffee or lunch, sharing stories and laughter. Their support had been a turning point for her, and she was grateful for the friendships that had formed because of that day. They reminded her that courage and kindness were not just personal qualities but also things that could be shared and strengthened through community and support. Months passed, and the cafe became known in the town not for the firing incident, but for how it had transformed into a place of kindness and respect. Tanya sometimes returned to visit, not as an employee, but as a friend and community member. She saw staff greeting customers warmly, helping each other when needed, and making the cafe a welcoming place. Tanya felt proud of what had happened, knowing that her small act of courage had sparked a bigger change. Through all of this, Tanya never lost sight of her own growth. She continued volunteering, taking classes, and speaking publicly about courage and kindness. She had learned that helping others was not always easy, but it was always meaningful. She understood that one person's actions, even if small, could inspire many others and create a lasting impact. She also learned the importance of resilience, facing challenges with a calm and determined heart, trusting that doing the right thing would eventually lead to positive outcomes. One evening, as Tanya walked home from the Veterans Center, she thought about everything that had happened since that fateful morning at the cafe. She thought about the fear she had felt, the support she had received, and the lives that had been touched by her actions. She realized that life could be unpredictable, and sometimes people would face unfair treatment or difficult situations. But she also knew that each person had the power to make a difference, no matter how small it seemed. Tanya smiled, feeling a sense of peace and purpose. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that she had learned lessons that would guide her for the rest of her life. She had learned that kindness, courage, and integrity were stronger than fear or injustice. She had learned that standing up for what was right could inspire others and create lasting change. And she had learned that even one small act of helping someone in need could ripple out into the world, touching lives in ways that could never be measured. As she reached her home, Tanya looked at the sky and took a deep breath. She felt ready for whatever challenges or opportunities might come next. She knew that her actions mattered, and that she had the power to continue making a difference in her community and beyond. The experience at the cafe had changed her life, but it had also shown her the strength of the human spirit and the importance of helping others without fear. And so, Tanya's story became a symbol of courage, kindness, and hope. People remembered her not just for what had happened in a cafe, but for the way she faced fear with courage, helped others without hesitation, and inspired positive change in her community. Her journey reminded everyone that standing up for what is right is always worth it, and that even small acts of kindness can create ripples that touch lives far beyond what anyone can imagine. Tanya continued to live her life guided by these lessons. She remained humble, compassionate, and determined to help others whenever she could. Her courage had turned a single unfair incident into a powerful story of hope and inspiration. She had faced fear, injustice, and uncertainty, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more committed to making the world a better place. And in doing so, Tanya left a lasting legacy, a reminder that kindness and courage are never wasted, that standing up for what is right can inspire others, and that even one person can make a big difference in the lives of many.